The Kepler 438b research station hummed with nervous energy as Dr. Sarah Chun stared at the holographic display floating above her desk. The jungle planet below them looked peaceful from orbit, its emerald canopy stretching endlessly beneath twin purple suns. But the data streams painting across her screen told a different story entirely. 17 research teams, she whispered to herself, scrolling through the casualty reports. 17 teams in 8 months. The door to her lab hissed open, and Commander Jake Morrison stepped inside, his weathered face grim. Behind him followed Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the expedition's xenobiologist, her usually bright demeanor replaced by obvious concern. "The Council's getting impatient, Sarah," Morrison said without preamble. "They want to know why we can't establish a foothold down there. The mineral surveys show enough rare Earth elements to power human expansion for the next 1,000 years." Sarah gestured to the hologram. "Because everything down there wants to kill us, Jake. And they're very, very good at it." The planet had been discovered 18 months ago during humanity's third wave of expansion beyond the solar system. Initial scans showed an oxygen-rich atmosphere, abundant water, and what appeared to be a thriving ecosystem. The mineral composition readings had made corporate executives salivate with greed. It seemed too good to be true. It was. "Show him the footage from Team Delta," Yuki said quietly, settling into a chair beside Sarah's workstation. Sarah's fingers danced across the holographic interface. The lab dimmed as a three-dimensional recording materialized in the center of the room. They were looking through the helmet camera of Marine Sergeant Lopez, part of the latest expedition to attempt a permanent base establishment. The recording showed a clearing in the jungle where humanity had tried to build their 5th research outpost. Prefabricated structures lay scattered like broken toys, their reinforced titanium walls shredded as if made of paper. Lopez moved cautiously through the wreckage, his rifle sweeping left and right. "Jesus," his recorded voice crackled through the speakers. "It's like something just tore through here like tissue paper." Morrison leaned forward. "What is this?" "The reports mention hostile wildlife, but this looks like military-grade destruction." "That's because it is," Sarah replied, fast-forwarding the recording. "Watch." The image flickered forward several minutes. Lopez had reached what remained of the main research building when a shadow passed overhead. The Marine looked up just as something massive crashed down from the canopy above. The creature that landed in front of Lopez defied easy description. It stood nearly 4 meters tall on powerful hind legs, its body covered in overlapping plates of what looked like natural armor. 6 arms sprouted from its torso, each ending in claws that gleamed like polished steel. Its head was elongated, predatory, with 4 eyes that seemed to track independently. But most unsettling were the organic weapons that extended from its forearms, living cannons that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. "Zinthri," Yuki whispered. "That's what the intercepted alien communications called them. Pack hunters. Apex predators." Lopez managed to fire 3 shots before the creature's biocannons discharged. The Marine's scream cut short as the recording ended abruptly. Morrison was silent for several seconds. "How many species like this are down there?" "At least 12 confirmed," Sarah answered, pulling up her research files. "The Zinthri are just the most common. There are the Vexilla, serpentine creatures that can phase through solid matter for short periods. The Grim Jaws, which hunt in coordinated swarms and can bite through powered armor. And the worst of all, the Dusk Stalkers." "What makes them worse than the others?" Morrison asked, though his expression suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "They're intelligent," Yuki replied. "Tool users. They've been observed setting traps, using tactics, even what appears to be rudimentary technology. The last expedition found evidence they'd been studying our equipment." Sarah brought up another hologram, this one showing a crude but effective projectile weapon clearly constructed from salvaged human materials. "They're learning from us. Adapting." Morrison rubbed his temples. "The Council won't accept another failure. They're talking about sending in a full military division." "More soldiers won't help," Sarah said firmly. "This isn't a numbers game. These creatures have evolved on a planet where everything is trying to kill everything else. They've been perfecting the art of predation for millions of years. Our technology gives us an advantage, but not enough of one." The commander stood and walked to the observation window, staring down at the deceptively peaceful planet below. "So, what do you recommend? Do we just abandon the richest mineral find in human history?" Sarah and Yuki exchanged glances. They've been discussing this very question for weeks. "There might be another option," Sarah said slowly. "But it's unconventional." Morrison turned back to face them. "I'm listening." "We stop trying to outfight them," Yuki explained. "Instead, we find someone who can outthink them. The military's best strategic minds have been working on this problem for months." "Not military minds," Sarah said. "We need someone who understands predators. Someone who thinks like they do." She pulled up a new file, and Morrison's eyebrows rose as he read the name on the screen. "Marcus Reed? The poacher?" "Former poacher," Sarah corrected. "Currently serving 25 to life for trafficking in endangered species. But before his arrest, he was the most successful big-game hunter in human history. He tracked and killed creatures that professional military units couldn't even find." Morrison looked skeptical. "You want to let a convicted criminal loose on an alien world full of super predators?" "I want to pit the most dangerous human who ever lived against the most dangerous aliens we've ever encountered," Sarah replied. "Reed survived for 15 years hunting the deadliest creatures on Earth and a dozen other worlds. He knows things about predator behavior that aren't in any textbook." "The man's a psychopath," Morrison said. "Maybe," Yuki admitted, "but he's our psychopath. And right now, he might be humanity's only chance of claiming this planet." Morrison stared at the casualty reports for a long moment. 17 teams, nearly 300 people, and the losses were accelerating as the planet's predators learned more about human weaknesses. "Even if I could convince the council to authorize it, how do we know Reed won't just run? Or worse, how do we know he won't join the other side?" Sarah smiled grimly. "Because Marcus Reed has spent his entire life proving that humans are the apex predators of the galaxy. And something tells me he's not going to let a few oversized aliens change that." The three of them stood in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside the observation window, Kepler 438b continued its slow rotation, its jungle canopy hiding horrors that had already claimed too many human lives. But somewhere in the depths of a maximum security prison on Earth, a man sat in his cell, unaware that he was about to become humanity's most unlikely champion in a war for survival that would determine whether humans truly deserve their place among the stars. The game was about to change. The question was whether Marcus Reed would be humanity's salvation or simply one more casualty in an alien jungle that had never known defeat. Morrison finally broke the silence. "Draft the proposal. I'll present it to the council tomorrow." As he left the lab, Sarah and Yuki looked at each other with a mixture of hope and terror. They were about to unleash something almost as dangerous as the creatures waiting in the jungle below. They could only pray they were making the right choice. The transport ship Retribution shuddered as it broke through Kepler 438b's atmosphere, its heat shields glowing cherry red against the alien sky. In the reinforced holding compartment, Marcus Reed sat perfectly still, his wrists and ankles secured with military-grade restraints. Despite his confinement, there was something unsettling about his calm demeanor, like a predator conserving energy before a hunt. Dr. Sarachan watched him through the reinforced viewport, studying the man who might be their salvation. Reed was smaller than she'd expected, perhaps 5'10", lean but muscular with graying brown hair and pale blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Scars crisscrossed his hands and forearms, souvenirs from decades of hunting the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. "Second thoughts, Doc?" Commander Morrison asked, joining her at the observation window. "Every minute since we left Earth," Sarah admitted. "His psychological profile makes for terrifying reading." Reed's file painted the picture of a man who had turned killing into an art form. Born on a frontier world where survival meant understanding which predator was hunting you, he learned early that the only way to stay alive was to become more dangerous than anything else in the ecosystem. By age 16, he was tracking man-eating Altarian tigers through methane swamps. By 25, he was leading hunting expeditions for wealthy clients who wanted to kill legendary beasts for sport. The criminal charges had come later, when environmental authorities discovered he'd been trafficking in protected species. But by then, Marcus Reed had already killed things that existed only in nightmares. "You know what the really scary part is?" Morrison continued, watching as Reed's eyes tracked the movement of something outside his viewport that no one else had noticed. He volunteered for this. When we offered him the deal, he didn't even hesitate. The deal had been simple: survive on Kepler 438b for 6 months and establish a viable human presence, and his sentence would be commuted to time served. Fail, and he'd simply become one more casualty on a very long list. The ship touched down in what remained of Landing Zone Delta, the site of humanity's most recent failed attempt at colonization. As the engines wound down, Reed finally spoke for the first time since boarding. "How long?" His voice was quiet, almost conversational. Sarah activated the intercom. "How long what? How long do I have before something tries to kill me?" She glanced at the mission clock. The previous expeditions were usually attacked within the first hour. Reed nodded thoughtfully. "That's actually longer than I expected. These aliens aren't very efficient." 20 minutes later, Reed stood in the ship's armory, examining the weapons available to him. The collection was impressive: plasma rifles, explosive rounds, energy shields, and enough firepower to level a small city. He ignored most of it. Instead, he selected a simple compound bow, a quiver of carbon arrows, a military knife, and a basic survival pack. The watching Marines exchanged confused glances. "Sir," Sergeant Torres ventured, "are you sure that's sufficient?" The creatures down there have been tearing through powered armor like paper. Reed strung the bow with practiced efficiency. "Sergeant, what's the longest any of your military units lasted down there?" 48 hours, sir. Delta Company held their position for 2 days before the Zinthri overran them. And how much ammunition did they expend in those 48 hours? Torres consulted his tablet. Approximately 12,000 rounds of various types, plus explosives. 12,000 rounds, Reed repeated, and they lasted 2 days. He shouldered his pack. "I'm going to last 6 months. Want to guess how many arrows I'm taking?" "How many?" Sarah asked despite herself. Reed smiled, and the expression was entirely predatory. 24. The cargo bay doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, and the humid air of Kepler 438b flooded in. The jungle scent was overwhelming: rich earth, decaying vegetation, and something else, the sharp, metallic smell of spilled blood. In the distance, the calls of alien creatures echoed through the canopy. Reed stepped onto the planet's surface and immediately crouched low, his head tilted as he listened to sounds no one else could identify. After 30 seconds, he stood and walked to what remained of a prefabricated shelter, examining the damage with professional interest. "Zinthri," he announced. "At least 6 of them. They hit this position from 3 directions simultaneously." He pointed to claw marks in the titanium walls. "See how these gouges angle downward? They dropped from above, probably from those thick branches about 40 meters up." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who had insisted on observing the initial deployment, pulled up her research files. "That matches our behavioral analysis. They're ambush predators." "No," Reed corrected, running his finger along a different set of marks. "They're persistent hunters masquerading as ambush predators. Look at this damage pattern. If they were true ambush predators, they would have struck once with maximum force, and either succeeded or retreated. Instead, they probed the defenses, tested responses, and adapted their tactics in real time." He moved to another section of wreckage, where blast marks scarred the ground. "Your people made a critical error. They tried to establish a defensive perimeter and hold ground. Against persistent hunters, that's exactly the wrong strategy." "What should they have done?" Morrison asked. "Kept moving. Never stayed in one place long enough for the hunters to learn their patterns." Reed shouldered his pack again. "Which is exactly what I'm going to do." As if summoned by his words, a low growl echoed from the jungle tree-line. Then, another from a different direction. Soon the air was filled with the sounds of approaching predators. The Marines immediately raised their weapons, their targeting systems locking on a movement in the undergrowth. Reed held up a hand. "Don't shoot," he said calmly. "Sir, there are at least a dozen signatures converging on our position," Torres reported. "I know." Reed notched an arrow, but didn't draw the bow. "They're testing us, trying to determine our threat level and capabilities." A massive shape emerged from the jungle, a Zinthri even larger than the ones in the previous recordings. It stood at the edge of the clearing, its 4 eyes fixed on Reed, its biocannons beginning to glow with accumulated energy. Reed stared back at the creature for several long seconds. Then, moving with fluid precision, he drew and released his arrow in one smooth motion. The carbon shaft took the Zinthri directly in the center of its primary eye cluster. The creature dropped instantly, its nervous system disrupted by the precisely placed shot. The jungle fell silent. Impossible, Yuki breathed. The bone structure around their visual organs is supposed to be impenetrable. Reed was already moving, jogging toward the tree. Only if you hit it straight on. But there's always a weak point if you know where to look. He paused at the jungle's edge and turned back to face the watching humans. Tell your bosses I'll check in once a week via radio. If you don't hear from me, assume I'm dead and send someone smarter next time. Wait, Sarah called out. What's your plan? How are you going to survive out there? Reed's predatory smile returned. Doc, your problem isn't that these aliens are too dangerous to fight. Your problem is that you're fighting them on their terms, in their environment, using their rules. He gestured to the dead Zinthri. I'm not going to fight them at all. I'm going to hunt them. There's a difference. With that, Marcus Reed disappeared into the alien jungle, leaving behind a group of humans who were beginning to realize they might have just unleashed something more dangerous than anything the planet itself could produce. In the distance, the hunting calls of unseen predators resumed, but now there was a different quality to them. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. For the first time in their evolutionary history, the apex predators of Kepler, 438b, were about to discover what it felt like to be prey. The ship's sensors tracked Reed's heat signature for exactly 17 minutes before losing it entirely. Whatever technique he was using to mask his presence, it was beyond their technology's ability to detect. Think he'll make it? Morrison asked as they prepared for departure. Sarah watched the jungle where Reed had vanished, noting how the alien sounds had changed since his arrival. The predators were communicating differently now, their calls more urgent, more coordinated. I think, she said slowly, that 6 months from now, this planet is going to be a very different place. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus Reed disappeared into the jungle, and the alien planet had gone mysteriously quiet. The research station's long-range sensors, constantly monitoring the surface for signs of the escaped convict, picked up something unprecedented. The predator populations were behaving erratically. Dr. Sarah Chun studied the latest behavioral analysis reports with growing fascination and unease. The Zinthri pack movements, previously predictable and territorial, had become chaotic. Hunting groups that had maintained the same territories for decades were abandoning their ranges entirely, fleeing deeper into the jungle's interior. This doesn't make sense, Yuki muttered, scrolling through ecological data on her tablet. The migration patterns suggest they're running from something, but we haven't detected any new apex species or environmental changes. Commander Morrison entered the monitoring station with Reed's first weekly check-in report in hand. Maybe this will explain it. The recording crackled to life, Reed's voice emerging from speakers with an unsettling calm. Day 21. Current position, approximately 40 kilometers southeast of the original landing zone. Weather's been consistent, hot, humid, perfect hunting conditions. There was a pause, filled with the ambient sounds of the alien jungle. But Sarah noticed something. The background noise was wrong. Where previous recordings from the surface had been filled with the constant calls and movements of predators, Reed's transmission carried only the gentle sounds of wind through leaves and distant water. I've made contact with 17 distinct species so far, Reed continued. Killed representatives of 11 of them. The Zinthri were overconfident. Pack hunters usually are when they've never faced a real challenge. The Vexhala were more interesting. Their phase-shifting ability isn't supernatural. It's bioelectric manipulation of molecular density. Useful to know. Morrison paused the recording. He's killed 11 different alien species in 3 weeks? How is that possible? Sarah replayed the xenobiological surveys. Each of the creatures Reed mentioned had been classified as extremely dangerous, requiring full military squads to engage with any hope of survival. The idea that one man with primitive weapons could systematically hunt them down seemed impossible. Continue the recording, Yuki requested. Reed's voice resumed. The Dusk Stalkers presented the most significant challenge. Their tool use indicated higher intelligence, but their tactics revealed a critical flaw. They think like prey animals who learn to fight back, not like true predators. Once I understood that, dealing with them became straightforward. The recording included a new sound, a low, alien whimper of pain in the background. I've taken one of their young alive for behavioral study, Reed explained matter-of-factly. Preliminary observations confirm they're not natural apex predators. They evolved from herbivores who developed defensive capabilities over millions of years. This explains their pack mentality and their reliance on overwhelming force rather than strategic thinking. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The clinical detachment in Reed's voice when describing the capture of an intelligent alien creature was deeply disturbing. However, the recording continued. I've discovered something your initial surveys missed. The real apex predator of this ecosystem isn't the Xinthri or any of the other species you've cataloged. The three humans exchanged glances. The comprehensive xenobiological survey had taken months to complete and had identified dozens of predatory species. There's something else here. Something that's been hunting all the other hunters. I found kill sites scattered throughout my operational area. Xinthri torn apart with surgical precision. Grimjaw swarms eliminated down to the last individual. Entire Vexhala colonies exterminated overnight. Reed's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. This planet has a genuine apex predator, and it's been playing with everything else like a cat with mice. The other species aren't the rulers of this ecosystem. They're just the middle management. The recording crackled with interference before resuming. I've designated this new species Apex Variant Unknown until I can make direct contact. My preliminary tracking suggests it's highly intelligent, possibly using advanced camouflage technology and definitely aware of my presence. It's been following me for the past 3 days. Morrison leaned forward. Following him? How can he be sure? Because it's good. Reed's voice answered as if he'd heard the question. Better than anything I've tracked before, but not better than me. It makes the same mistake all apex predators make. It assumes it's the most dangerous thing in its environment. The transmission ended there, leaving the three researchers in uncomfortable silence. We need to abort the mission, Morrison said finally. Extract Reed before he encounters this new species. With what? Sarah asked. We barely have enough fuel for one more landing, and Reed's 50 kilometers into hostile territory. Besides, he knew the risks when he volunteered. Yuki pulled up the ecological monitoring data again. Look at this migration pattern. Every predatory species within a 100-kilometer radius is fleeing the region where Reed is operating. They're not running from him. They're running from whatever he's hunting. Over the following days, the situation on the planet's surface continued to deteriorate in ways none of them had anticipated. Long-range scans revealed massive ecological disruptions as predator species abandoned their traditional territories en masse. Entire food chains were collapsing as apex hunters fled to previously uninhabitable regions of the planet. Reed's second weekly transmission provided more disturbing details. Day 28. Made direct contact with Apex Variant Unknown at 0347 local time. Sarah adjusted the audio filters, trying to clean up the interference that seemed to plague all transmissions from Reed's current location. Initial assessment. The creature stands approximately 6 meters tall, possesses active camouflage capabilities that render it nearly invisible, and demonstrates tool use sophistication beyond any previously documented alien species. It uses weapons, not biological appendages, but constructed tools that appear to be designed for hunting other apex predators. The recording was interrupted by a sound none of them could identify, something between a roar and mechanical grinding, followed by what might have been an explosion. Engagement lasted 47 minutes. Reed continued, breathing heavily. The creature is intelligent enough to use tactics I've never seen before. It laid traps within traps, used misdirection, and adapted its strategy in real time based on my responses. Most impressive predator I've ever faced. There was a long pause before Reed spoke again, and when he did, his voice carried a tone Sarah had never heard before. Genuine excitement. I wounded it. Drew first blood from something that's been the undisputed master of this planet for probably millions of years. It retreated, but not in fear. It's regrouping, learning from our encounter. Tomorrow, it'll come back with new tactics. Jesus Maudisson Vispeded. He's enjoying this. It gets worse, Yuki said, checking her tablet. The ecological data shows the mass exodus is accelerating. It's like every predator on the planet can sense that something fundamental has changed in the power structure. Reed's voice crackled through the speakers one final time. This is what I was born for. Everything else I've hunted was just practice for this moment. The apex predator of an alien world, a creature that's never known defeat, going head-to-head with a human who's never known surrender. The transmission cut to static, but in the background, just before it ended, Sarah was certain she heard something that chilled her to the bone. The sound of Reed laughing. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said slowly, "what exactly have we unleashed down there?" Sarah stared at the jungle planet through the observation window, watching storm clouds gather over the region where Reed was hunting his ultimate prey. The ecological monitors showed chaos spreading across the entire continent as predator species fled from something they instinctively knew represented a fundamental change in their world's natural order. "I think," she said quietly, "we've introduced an invasive species more dangerous than anything evolution ever produced." In the jungle below, two apex predators were locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse, each one convinced it was the cat. But only one of them was human, and only one of them understood that the true apex predator wasn't necessarily the strongest or the fastest or even the most intelligent. Sometimes, it was simply the one willing to go further than anyone else thought possible. The fourth week brought changes that defied everything the research team thought they understood about alien ecosystems. The planet's surface was transforming in ways that registered on orbital sensors as massive geographical shifts, but closer analysis revealed something far more disturbing. The jungle itself was reorganizing around the conflict between Reed and the unknown apex predator. Dr. Sarah Chun watched in fascination and horror as satellite feeds showed entire sections of forest going dark. Not destroyed, simply empty of all higher life forms. The smaller creatures, the herbivores and scavengers, remained, but every predatory species above a certain threshold had vanished from vast territories. "It's like they're clearing the battlefield," Yuki observed, studying movement patterns on her holographic display. Every major predator species is evacuating a roughly 200-kilometer radius around Reed's last known position. Commander Morrison reviewed tactical reports that made no sense according to any military doctrine he'd studied. They're abandoning prime, hunting territory that their species have held for millions of years. What could cause that level of species-wide panic? Reed's third weekly transmission provided part of the answer, though it raised more questions than it resolved. Day 23. "The creature has been studying me." Reed's voice carried a quality that none of them had heard before. Not fear, exactly, but a profound respect that bordered on awe. "It's more intelligent than our initial assessment indicated. Possibly more intelligent than anything I've encountered." The recording included background sounds that the audio analysis software couldn't categorize. Rhythmic clicking like massive claws on stone, but with an underlying pattern that suggested communication rather than random movement. "I've discovered it's been manipulating the other predator species for decades, possibly centuries. The territorial boundaries I initially attributed to natural evolution were actually imposed management structures. The creature has been farming this planet's apex predators, maintaining optimal population levels and genetic diversity." Sarah paused the recording. "Farming them? For what purpose?" "It's been breeding them for specific traits," Reed's voice continued as she resumed playback. "Enhanced aggression, improved hunting capabilities, stronger defensive characteristics. The Zinthri, Vexhala, Dusk Stalkers, they're not natural evolutionary endpoints. They're domesticated predators, selectively bred for maximum challenge value." The implications hit all three researchers simultaneously. This wasn't a planet where evolution had produced numerous apex predators. It was a hunting preserve maintained by something vastly more sophisticated than they'd imagined. "The creature hunts for sport," Reed explained. "It's been the sole apex predator of this world for so long that it created its own prey species to maintain the challenge. Every natural predator on this planet exists because this thing allowed it to exist." Morrison leaned back in his chair, processing the revelation. "We sent our people into what amounts to an alien's personal hunting ground. More than that," Yuki said, reviewing the ecological data with new understanding. We sent them into a controlled environment designed to test and eliminate any species that might pose a threat to the real apex predator. Reed's transmission continued with details that painted an even more disturbing picture. I've managed to track it to what appears to be its central habitat. The structure is partially natural cave system, partially constructed architecture. The technology level is inconsistent with the primitive weapons it initially displayed. There's a sound like massive machinery powering up in the background. It's been deliberately limiting itself during our encounters, using primitive weapons because it wanted to test my capabilities under equivalent conditions. Now that it's satisfied with its assessment, it's escalating. The recording crackled with interference, then cleared to reveal Reed's voice heavy with something between anticipation and dread. It's not trying to kill me anymore. It's trying to recruit me. Recruit him, Morrison echoed. The transmission provided an explanation that chilled them all. The creature has been alone for millions of years. The ultimate predator on a planet it's shaped entirely to suit its needs, with no equals, no challenges, no peers. It's been maintaining this entire ecosystem as a desperate attempt to create something worthy of its attention. Reed's breathing was audible now, rapid and shallow. It wants me to stay, to become its hunting partner. It's offering to share its territory, its prey species, its accumulated knowledge of predation across geological timescales. Jesus, Morrison whispered. What did he tell it? I'm considering the offer. The 3 words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah felt her stomach clench as the implications became clear. This creature represents millions of years of evolutionary perfection in predation. Its knowledge of hunting techniques, prey behavior, and environmental manipulation is beyond anything humanity has ever achieved. The partnership it's offering would make me the most formidable hunter in the galaxy. The recording paused, filled only with the ambient sounds of the alien jungle and something else, a low, harmonic humming that seemed to resonate with frequencies that human ears could barely detect. But there's a price, Reed continued. Accepting its offer means abandoning my humanity, becoming something else, something designed purely for the hunt, with no other purpose or desire. Morrison stood and walked to the observation window, staring down at the planet that had become something far more complex than a simple colonial target. He's losing his mind down there. The isolation, the constant danger, it's broken something inside him. No, Sarah said slowly, reviewing Reed's psychological profile again. This is exactly who he's always been. We just never understood what that meant. Yuki pulled up biological scans from Reed's periodic medical check-ins transmitted with his reports. Look at this. His stress hormone levels are actually decreasing. His brain activity patterns show increased theta waves, the same patterns associated with intense focus and pleasure responses. He's happy, Sarah realized. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Reed has found something that truly challenges him, something that understands him. Reed's final transmission of the week confirmed their worst fears. I've requested a 24-hour consideration period. The creature has agreed, though I sense its impatience. It's been alone for so long that the prospect of genuine companionship has awakened something in it that might be desperation. The recording quality degraded as interference increased, but Reed's voice remained clear. I understand now why every military unit failed on this planet. You sent soldiers to fight a war, but this was never about warfare. This is about predation in its purest form. And I'm the first human this creature has met who speaks its language. Static overwhelmed the transmission for several seconds before Reed's voice emerged one final time. Decision pending. If my next transmission is late, assume I've accepted the offer. Earth will need to find another way to claim this planet. The communication ended, leaving the 3 researchers in a silence that stretched until Morrison finally spoke. We have to abort. Send a full military fleet if necessary. But we get Reed off that planet before he makes a decision we can't reverse. It's too late for that, Sarah said, checking the orbital positioning data. The nearest reinforcements are 6 weeks away. Reed's answer is due in 24 hours. They sat in the growing darkness of the research station, watching storm clouds gather over the alien planet below, knowing that somewhere in that jungle, 2 apex predators were negotiating terms that could alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The real question wasn't whether Reed would accept the creature's offer, Based on his psychological profile and his obvious fascination with the ultimate hunt, Sarah was certain he would. The question was what humanity would do when faced with a planet guarded by two apex predators working in perfect, deadly harmony. Reed's final transmission came exactly 24 hours later, but it wasn't what anyone expected. Day 29. I declined the offer. Dr. Sarah Chun nearly dropped her coffee at Reed's matter-of-fact announcement. Commander Morrison and Dr. Yuki Tanaka rushed to the communication station as Reed's voice continued. The creature was disappointed, but not entirely surprised. It had been observing human behavior through our previous expeditions and had calculated a 73% probability that I would refuse. Apparently, it understands our species better than we understand ourselves. The recording quality was clearer than any previous transmission, suggesting Reed had moved to higher ground or acquired better equipment. In the background, they could hear something unprecedented, the normal sounds of a thriving jungle ecosystem. Bird calls, insect noise, the rustle of small animals moving through undergrowth. However, my refusal led to an interesting development. The creature made a counter-proposal. Sarah exchanged worried glances with Morrison. Nothing in Reed's psychological profile suggested he would turn down the ultimate hunting challenge, which meant something even more significant was at play. Instead of partnership, it offered me a different arrangement. A contest. Reed's voice carried a tone of savage anticipation that chilled all three listeners. It would give me a 1-week head start, then hunt me using its full capabilities. No restrictions, no handicaps, no mercy. Morrison leaned forward. He's insane. Even Reed can't survive against that thing at full power. If I win, Reed continued, if I can kill it despite its millions of years of evolutionary advantage, I prove that humanity deserves this planet. If it kills me, humans abandon all claims to this world and never return. Yuki pulled up the ecological monitoring data, noting changes that had begun approximately 6 hours earlier. Look at this. The mass predator exodus has reversed. They're returning to their territories. The creature has already begun recalling its managed species, Reed confirmed. It's restoring the planetary ecosystem to full operational status in preparation for our contest. Every apex predator that fled is being summoned back to witness the final hunt. The transmission paused, filled with sounds that defied identification. Massive movements in the distance, the calls of creatures that had no terrestrial equivalents, and, underneath it all, a rhythmic pounding like a colossal heartbeat. I accepted its terms immediately. Sarah felt her heart sink. Reed had just committed humanity to a winner-take-all gamble with the richest planet they'd ever discovered, and the stakes were being decided by single combat between the galaxy's most dangerous human and an alien apex predator that had ruled its world unchallenged for millions of years. The contest begins in 72 hours, Reed announced. I'm using the remaining time to complete final preparations. The creature has graciously provided detailed topographical data and behavioral profiles for all planetary species. It wants our hunt to be conducted on equal informational footing. Morrison stood abruptly. We have to stop this. Send a rescue shuttle. Extract Reed by force if necessary. With what authority? Sarah asked. Reed was given full operational discretion. Technically, he's acting within the parameters of his mission. His mission was to establish a human presence, not gamble away humanity's claim to an entire planet. Reed's voice crackled through the speakers, as if responding to Morrison's objection. For those listening who think this is reckless, understand that this contest was inevitable from the moment humans arrived in this system. The creature has been preparing for our species for decades. It knew we would eventually send someone capable of meaningful opposition. The recording included new sounds, the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging, and the metallic clanging of constructed tools. Reed was apparently making final modifications to his equipment. It chose this planet specifically because it wanted to test our species. Every other world in the sector has resources we need, but this one has something unique. The perfect environment for determining whether humans are genuine apex predators or simply aggressive omnivores with advanced technology. Yuki reviewed the stellar survey data with new understanding. He's right. The mineral concentrations here are almost artificially high. This planet was designed to attract us. The creature has been manipulating human expansion patterns for years, Reed continued. Subtle gravitational adjustments to asteroid belts, strategic placement of mineral signatures, carefully timed radio emissions that suggested habitable worlds. It's been guiding us here. Sarah felt the pieces falling into place. We're not colonists or conquerors. We're specimens being evaluated. Exactly, Reed confirmed. And in 72 hours, I'm going to prove that human specimens are defective in all the right ways. The transmission quality improved dramatically as Reed apparently activated high-power broadcasting equipment. I'm uploading complete tactical assessments of all species encountered, topographical analysis of optimal hunting terrain, and behavioral profiles that should enable future human expeditions to establish successful permanent bases. Data streams began flowing into the station's computers, gigabytes of information that represented weeks of careful observation and analysis. Sarah watched in amazement as comprehensive files appeared. Detailed anatomical diagrams showing weak points in alien predator species, behavioral pattern analysis that revealed optimal hunting strategies, environmental data that mapped safe travel routes through previously impassable jungle. Regardless of the contest outcome, this information will ensure human success on similar worlds, Reed explained. I've learned more about apex predator behavior in 4 weeks than our entire xenobiological research division has compiled in decades. Morrison reviewed the incoming data streams. This is incredible. Detailed countermeasures for every major threat species, safe zone maps, resource locations. He's given us everything we need to colonize this type of environment. But only if he wins the contest, Yuki pointed out. If he loses, we're banned from the planet forever. Reed's final words carried absolute confidence despite the impossible odds he faced. I won't lose. Not because I'm stronger or faster or better equipped than my opponent, but because I understand something about apex predation that it doesn't. What's that? Sarah whispered to the recording. True apex predators don't hunt for survival or territory or resources. They hunt for the same reason humans explore space. Because it's what they are, not what they do. The creature has spent millions of years perfecting its predatory abilities, but it's forgotten why predation matters. The transmission crackled with interference as storm systems moved across the planet's surface. Predation isn't about death. It's about life choosing to continue under the most challenging circumstances possible. The creature hunts because it's programmed to hunt. I hunt because I choose to hunt, and choice makes all the difference. Reed's voice carried a quality of serene certainty that somehow made his impossible situation sound almost routine. Contest begins in 67 hours. Win or lose, it's been an honor representing our species. Read out. The communication ended, leaving the 3 researchers staring at a planet that had suddenly become the stage for a contest that would determine humanity's future among the stars. Think he has a chance? Morrison asked after a long silence. Sarah watched the alien jungle where the ultimate test of human evolution was about to unfold. Somewhere in that green maze, 2 apex predators were preparing for a hunt that would prove once and for all whether humans truly belonged at the top of the galactic food chain. I think, she said slowly, that 72 hours from now, we're either going to be planning the colonization of humanity's richest world or sending a message to Earth explaining why we just lost our best chance at galactic expansion. The waiting began, and with it, the terrible certainty that the outcome would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe.